Now, your definition of what the church is. What is the church? It's certainly not this abominable thing that's here on this earth made out of stone that has steeples and a stained of glass and that has office hours between 11 and 12 every Sunday morning. The church is not a group of people either who are gathering together living by human life. If they do that, they're going to kill one another or something terrible. Take a look at us and you will get some idea of what it's like when Christians get together living by and drawing from this fallen human life of ours. No. The church is when people who have named the name of Christ, who have been impregnated with the life of Christ, and who are living by that life, come together, who are corporately then living not by human life, but living by the life of God and expressing corporately that life together. God will have a people who will live by a higher life and who will express that life. This is the gospel. This is the church. This is what the church is to be, the gathering of God's people living by a life not their own. There's a story in the book of Acts 5. The apostles are in jail. They've had a pretty rough day. An angel opens the jail door and escorts them out on the street. And just as he does, the angel says, "Go and speak to the people in the temple all the words of this life." Do you realize that those same apostles had once cowered behind locked doors, fearing death, even though they had lived with life for 3.5 or 4 years? But living with the Lord and living with the Lord who lived by the life of God had not helped, for that life form was not in them. They were living by a lower life form. But after the resurrection and after the day of Pentecost, they got a new, higher life in them, and they were enveloped in that life. And the day the angel told them to go and speak of that life, they knew what they were doing because that life was in them and they lived by it. Now watch them. They go before the Sanhedrin. They're in the Sanhedrin, in the prison, in the temple. They are proclaiming that life. And they were doing it unafraid. Now they didn't care. They didn't care about anything, for they had learned to live by another life, an eternal, uncreated life that has no beginning and could not have an end. No matter what happened to them, they were becoming one with that life. This life is what the apostles were bearing witness to. This higher form of life is what drove them. This is what their gospel was, as this they preached. This life had invaded this tragic fallen earth, and this life had come to be implanted in them, or had been implanted in them, and they were living by it, and they were now proclaiming to others, you need not live by a lower form of life. You can live by the life of God. You can have that life in you, and you can live by the life the Lord lives by. And so, with that message, first century Christians became legends. And it was with that experience that went with that message. They knew something that we never heard. They experienced something where we never dreamed could they experience. And that is that we could have that life in us. Have not only that life, but live by it. They were unstoppable. Why not? They were thriving on an energy and drawing from a form of life higher than their enemies. Remember, the angel said it, go and bear witness to this life. It was a life that naturally has joy in prison and naturally gives peace in the face of death. Now, this is what the church is. Part of the Lord's work in our day, as He is moving in our day, is to show us how to live by His life. If you live by His life in the body of Christ, corporately, together with others, you will eventually be fulfilling His eternal purpose. The Lord is saying this: I have come to give you a life, not like the life you have now. Not a life that you might see or seem to be the life of some pious Christian with a halo. You admire him and say, this is the life. No, that is not the life of the Lord. He has said, I have come to give you a life that has nothing to do with you. It's not like you. It doesn't have your characteristics nor your character. It does not give you glean. It does not have your attitude. It is not like you, does not have your outlook. It doesn't favor you in any way in any of the areas of your life. You're not used to this life, nor are you well acquainted with this life yet. This life has virtually nothing in common with the characteristics of human life. The two life forms usually, almost always, look at things totally different and go in totally different directions from one another. This life doesn't think like, doesn't act like, and most of all, does not react like your life. Nor does it consider or apprehend the way that your life considered and apprehend. For this is a life that is lived by God in light and revelation, and not in the attributes of humanity. The foundation of this life, the way this life looks at matters, the way this life reaches conclusions are totally opposed to all of your and my daily processes. This life is not just higher, but utterly different. Its values are different as the level between a human and a lower life form. The view of this life, its attainment, the way it sees problems, we can especially observe this in the matter of suffering. This life does not hesitate to suffer. Everything that is in you and everything around you is in a totally different realm, different level, and from a totally different vantage point than the life of the Lord. Third level life is not like the life of divinity, for that life is glorious. And Jesus said to you, he said, I am come not to give you a higher life that is something neat and will cushion you from life's woes. No, I am not come to give you that. I'm come to give you a form of life known in heavenly places in realms of light. I'm not going to give you a little scrap of this life either. Not just a taste of it. Not just enough to squeak by on. Not even an adequate dosage. I am going to give you this higher life to live by, pressed down and running over. I'm going to dump it on you in superabundance. Now, what's your part? Well, your part is really very simple. Your part is to learn to live by that life. And as you do, you won't need me. You won't need anything. All you need to do is learn to live by a life, not your own. Here. You have all you need. Everything is in the one who lives in you. To live by a life, not your own, that is wonderful. But it may be even more wonderful and even more radical than you are. Let's see if I can illustrate this. Have you ever seen a tree longing to become a fish? No, of course not. Or a bird wanting to be a horse? No. All forms of life seem to be fairly contented, from all that we can observe, to be what they are, except man. Why does man have a natural sense in him that he is emits? Innately, he realizes something is awry. It is because, and hold on to your chair, God never planned there to be anything called man. I'll qualify that. That is, his intention was not to leave you or me with no more human life than we've got right now to live by, or no more than human life to live by. Man is running around on this planet living by human life, and that was an unplanned matter. In fact, it's an unplanned disaster. God never intended for the species we call Homo sapien to live by human life. That was not his original purpose in creating it. Humanity was never intended to be a life source. God never intended man to be a life form. God intended for man to take the life of God and become the Lord's own people, his own divine race, a race after its own kind, bearing after its own kind. That was his plan. Praise his name. Now, still, I'm not sure that you realize how radical this whole fact is. I would like to make another point of this, but it's not going to be easy. I could spend a great deal of time considering, and so could you, this very subject. What does it really mean to be a Christian? Have you ever noticed the great gulf that exists between forms of life? Each life form has little or nothing in common with forms of life above it or below it. Now let's illustrate this. Do you think that a fish has the idea it would like to have its tail planted in soil, lift its fins toward the sky, and sin all day? The idea is ridiculous. Do you think a dog ever just longed and panted to get up in a tree and sit on eggs all day? Absurd. Well, let's take it from the other direction. Has a bird ever wanted to wallow around in a pig pen or dig a hole and bury a bone? Would a dog enjoy listening to an opera, watching a play, or baking a cake? No. There is an awesome gulf between all major classifications of life forms. Furthermore, in all the history of creation, fish life has never really shown any interest in animal life. They're hardly conscious that one another exists. And animal life has shown virtually no interest in sea life or life that exists in the air. Consider it. Let's go further. Have you ever heard of a blackbird setting up a society to take care of elks? Have you ever seen a rhinoceros pass the hat for kittens? Life forms each have their own patterns, their own instincts, and their own unique interests, their own sense of things, their own values of things. All their interests are considered central among their own life form, and their interest is centered there. This is true of all species, including men. Now, I realize that we have our humanitarian societies for the protection of this and that, but that's a very minor consideration in human life. About the only interest one life form ever shows in another life form is to learn how to stay out of its way. There is the sense within them to live at peace with one another unless one happens to be a predator. And then the other one is very interested in staying out of the predator's way. As I said, there is a staggering leap between the fish and the bird life, and yet there are only one category separated from one another. Fish do not think like birds, do not travel or live like birds. They have virtually nothing in common with birds. Yet a bird's life is a life form only one step higher than a fish. Have you ever thought about the two life forms next to you? The one above you and the one right below you. Would an angel enjoy learning calculus? Running a computer, sitting around for years trying to come up with some great new technological breakthrough like a better smog device on trucks? Can you see an angel doing that? That would be repulsive to an angel. Just as repulsive as it would be for you to go sniffing around the ground and stick an old bone in the dirt and cover it up with your feet. As a matter of fact, you could hardly conceive of being an angel. First of all, you wouldn't be a boy or a girl. You'd have to be a neuter. And shoot into space faster than light, delivering messages from heaven to earth and from earth back to heavens again, could really get to be a drag for a human. The angels enjoy it. Well, at least 2/3 of them do anyway. They wouldn't seriously want to become a crummy old human any more than a crummy old human would like to become a polecat. There's a vast gulf between you and the two life forms nearest to you, the angels above and the land animals beneath. You have no interest in living the life of an animal. You never even thought about it. And what you have ever longed to be a little animal would probably put you into some kind of an institution. And right now, it probably never crossed your mind. The patterns of existence, thought, purpose, instincts, desires, outlook are so radically different that it's inconceivable. Do you realize that you are twice removed from the life form of divinity? The life form of God is as far from you as the life form of a fish is from you. Yet the Lord himself came to give you his life, that radical life, and to allow you to stop living by your life and to begin living by a life not your own, begin living by his life. Here's one obvious fact. That an event is going to produce quite a radical change in you. That's putting it mildly. Let's see if we can begin to conceive of how radical a change this implies. And as we do, you can get some idea of just how off course we are as Christians, how ridiculous some of our understandings of what the word Christian really means, and what Christian undertakings are, or I should say, are not. Certainly we're not talking about works here. You can't act out another life form and become that life form. This can only be done by the life form being implanted in you, and by you then drawing a source, as source, that life form. Let's say that the first explorers on the South Pole, when they discovered the penguin, decided to make it into a human being. The explorers began demanding all the penguins to put suspenders on and shoes, sit at a table, hold a fork, determined to make penguins into humans. Well, the penguin is terribly disinterested, and to say the least, the whole thing is not only a study in absurdity, but a total failure. The explorers insist. They tell the penguins, oh, there are many things you need. For instance, you have to be a democracy. We're going to teach you how to stuff a ballot and vote for a leader. You can't go on just having herd instincts. Now remember, they're not going to make penguins act like men, but they're going to change them so that they're interested in streets, technology, schools, colleges, inventions, philosophy. Committed to making penguins men. Can they do it? No. Why? Because a penguin doesn't have the right life form. Try all that you may. You'll never make a penguin be stirred up about slums, the poor, the next election, or any of these things. That is so obvious to even think of it seems to be ridiculous. But when we turn this around, it doesn't begin to be ridiculous at all. Men do not try to get other life forms to be like humans. Our interest in other life forms is small at the very best. But look at the Christian. Look at the Christian today. Men are constantly calling us, as Christians, to do certain things, to accomplish certain things, to become certain things. And yet the Christian, having heard this, seeks to respond, and he cannot. The Christian life is an activity of a higher form of life. It is not an attainment. It is not something you do. It is not something you accomplish. It is not something God expects of you to perform. The Christian life is life, not human. Christians today don't know that they have God's life in them. I think you could take virtually any sermon that is being preached today or has ever been preached in the Christian family and study it very carefully, and you would see something similar to the explorers standing in front of the penguins, calling them to be humans and determining that they would eat with a fork and speak of philosophy. As you talk to Christians who don't even know they have the life of God in them. No wonder there is so much askew in the Christian family. It's exhausting for you or for me to try to respond to that appeal, for we are using the wrong form of life to live by. You, a Christian, can only be Christian as you lay hold of and live by a life not your own. Unfortunately, most of us didn't know what the Lord meant when he said, I've come to give you life, didn't know that life was in us, and certainly don't have the biggest idea how to live by that life. Let me ask you something. I want you to look at human life for just a moment. It would be very, very silly, would it not, for you to start caring about which dog in your community is head of the dog pack. The dogs running around, there's always one in charge. Anybody who'd be interested in that would be a little odd. That's silly. Well, then why would someone ask me to be interested in politics? It's the wrong form of life. I am a Christian. I do not belong to the unregenerated unbeliever whom the Lord reckons as dead. On the other hand, to ask me, a human, to perform divine acts, to live according to the divine standard, is just as ridiculous as asking the penguin to drive a car. Don't tell me what I'm supposed to do as a Christian. I cannot do it. I have the wrong life form, and I'm used to living by that life form. No, set me free. Don't tell me what to do. Tell me I have the life of God in me, and tell me how to live by that life. Now, if a new life form were to come to our earth today, something higher than us, let's say, or worse, or something lower, we could expect that life form to come, find somewhere on this earth some sort of suitable habitat. And it would begin immediately to ignore all the other life forms around and go about expressing the unique nature of this form of life. Dogs sniff out rabbits and bark at the moon. You never wanted to bark at the moon. Cats chase mice and purr all day long. That's their life form's expression. Birds fly, build nests, hunt worms. That's typical. And that form of life coming from some other place would do the very same thing. Now let's look at this thing called man. And I'm speaking now not of Adam in his innocence. And I'm speaking not of the Christian in being saved and having been impregnated with the life of God. Just man. What is his way? Well, he thinks an awful lot. He acquires money. He gets a really big kick out of helping others. He loves to acquire knowledge. He eats up education. He really likes power and riches and luxury. He is captivated by technological advances, higher and better trinkets. He goes ape over such things like being the main dog on the block, or in the city, or in the state, or in the capital, or even in the world. He has never shown any real significant interest in the life forms that are on the bottom of the sea. Well, there is one life form other than his own he seems to be very, very interested in. He once skinned a pig, and he's been fighting over who owns that pig now for several generations. And every week, millions of Homo sapiens watch to see who's going to end up with that piece of pig skin for the week. So far, there have been billions of dollars spent to settle this dispute. As of last Sunday, it was not resolved. Now, that's not all. He loves to play games, and he loves even more to watch them, all sorts of games. Most of all, he likes to talk about them when they're over with. Now, that's man life. That's the expression of the third highest life form after it has been fallen. This creature is wild about building an intricate, complex thing which he calls civilization. And by the way, never forget, he really enjoys being religious and sinning. Now, is that God? Have I just described the Lord? No, of course not. You know that and recognize it immediately. All right, but be careful. For you are a Christian, and you belong to a higher realm of life. And sometimes we don't make the connection that when we speak of the kind of life that I just mentioned and described its ways, we are not speaking of the life form of the Christian. What if this life form, this higher form of life, ever did come to this earth? What would it do? Would it do all the things that I just mentioned? Do you think that if God came down from heavenly places and came to earth, that he would spend a good part of his life trying to get rich? Would he be excited about pushing for great technological advances? Would he go to the university and try to get a degree or several degrees and encourage other people to get degrees? Would he end up watching what happened to that pigskin? Would he sell his life existence's very soul to get a car and a 3-bedroom house? Seriously. Would he be an upper class, middle class, or lower class? Would he be interested in who was number one? Would he launch a campaign to reform local government? Would he spend all summer campaigning for his candidate for the presidency? Would he really, really care? No. And how do I know? Because he's a totally different life form from the bat species. He has no more genuine interest in getting involved in the things of fallen man's social affairs than you are in reforming the local fish hatchery. Now, wait a minute, because we're going to bridge a gap here. Now, let's get this a little bit closer to you and to me, for though we are human, there is something also divine going on in us. You know, God would not conduct himself in the way the typical fallen man would who lives on this earth. But wait a minute. If that divine life did visit this earth in you, but lived instead of you, what would your life be interested in? 1,000 years ago, fallen man invented something where people could come from all over and study. And they could study many, many different kinds of knowledge. In fact, any knowledge normally or universal knowledge. Therefore, they called it a university. Now, that was something invented by man. Totally man. Nothing like a dog with scratches, fleas, and nothing like angels nor God. Natural expression of the human, this poor creature, this fallen creature called man. Now, about 200 years ago, someone got up out of bed and said, well, let's have a university that's Christian. That's like talking about an obedience school for humans. So we can teach them to roll over and sit up and pant and bark. In other words, that's not a Christian's form of life. In other words, they were trying to send the wrong form of life to the university. And that's what we did. We took pure pagan subjects, psychology and philosophy, and we made Christian people professors in those classes, and therefore we announced that the university was Christian. And today, it is said with great wisdom, son, you are a Christian, therefore you need to go to a Christian university. There ain't no such thing any more than there are underwater swimming lessons for angels. The very word Christian designates a specific life form, just as fish, reptiles, Homo sapiens designate a specific life form. No, wait a minute. Don't you believe that Christians should get a university education? Well, I can say no to that and get hanged. Or I can say yes, all Christians should go to the university and get an education and spend the rest of my life not being able to live with myself. But I would like to turn that back and say that that question is irrelevant. It should never be asked. The very fact that a question like that is being asked really shows us that we do not understand the Lord nor what he has done and what we really are. But most of all, it shows that we don't even know the first thing about how to live by this higher life that is in us. I'll answer the question. First of all, It is a question only a lower life form would ask. It's a man question. This question is based on the proposition of good and evil. I am supposed to say to myself, I am a Christian. Christians should be the best of citizens. Therefore, Christians should have a good education so I can use my talents to serve the Lord, maybe become a really good Christian businessman. Or is it singer? Or is it guitar player? Or is it artist? A great Christian lawyer? Whatever. And serve God with my God-given talents. Hogwash. That is a concept that first century believers would have fainted dead away in the presence of. You're only being logical. You are a believer speaking as the unbeliever. You are the believer living by your lower life. You are judging by good and evil. You're deciding according to past traditions, reasonableness, and past group precedent. You're thinking on your own, apart from God. But because of human influence, because of what's around us, and because we have really not really understood the vast difference between His life form and our life form, and that we can live by that life, therefore we walk around making all of our decisions above the neck. God's life form in you does everything that it does below the Adam's apple. But we'll not get into that now. No, it's a human trait to think in those terms of being a good Christian, a witness, a good businessman, a this or that. Therefore, I must have a Christian education. No sane man would ask if an angel needs a higher education. Brothers and sisters, it has never occurred to an angel to take this premise into his life. He is not sitting around considering this proposition. And despite the fact that this may be a view that we should all be enrolled in a Christian institution, the fact of the matter is the institution is not Christian unless Jesus Christ Himself had come to earth, a life form higher than any other that this human eye had ever seen, or this earth had ever seen. If He had come and founded one, that would have been the work of a higher form of life. But He did not come interested in riches. He did not come interested. He didn't even come so greatly interested in the need of animals or the lost human world. He only spoke to those of us who would be redeemed, and spoke of caring for our brethren. And our brethren are those who carry in them a common life with us. I realize that to question the sacred cow could incite a riot. But what I have just described is not the way divine life operates. Divine life does not conduct itself, nor apprehend, nor lay hold on this level. We, therefore, must leave the level of human life that we're so used to living and start out slowly, and surely it'll only take 70 years to learn to live by a life not human. To do that is to launch out on the greatest of all adventures and to enter into a totally different realm. I'm going to pursue this just a little bit further. Is there such a thing as a Christian college? There are pagan subjects taught. There are subjects taught that are rooted in an unbelieving tradition, nonetheless taught by believing men. That does not make the activity on that campus divine activity. As a Christian going to college, you may say Here I am, saved with divine life in me, but I'm still living by human life, and I'm about to go to an institution to learn pagan knowledge that will cause me to live even more and depend more on human life. And then you would be correct in that proposition. If it is a Christian college that you are considering, or that you go to or have gone to, then you would be going there to learn to live by a life not your own, not one to absorb the traditions of pagan information. High education, technology, business, all are compartments and components of the civilization that are human life activity. I give the illustration of the potter who made the goblet, the cup to fill with wine. The vase was stolen, damaged, and dirtied. Now, if the vase is found, clean and mended, its purpose is not yet fulfilled. Its purpose is not to return it as a sort of missionary to clay, to go back to a clay pit and stand there as a goblet, with a non-profit tax-exempt organization behind it, of course, prevailing upon clay to do something. A vase that is living has no place going out to prevent abuse to clay. No, a vase that is living is human. Man is divine. For that's what you are. A vase, a goblet, a cup for divine life. You do not turn around and go back and tell the human beings to live differently. You might invite them to become partakers of divinity, but you do not go back as a missionary to straighten up their source of living, which is pure humanity. Well, we need so much to see these things clearly in our minds and realize that we are entrenched in such human concepts, and they must be abandoned and in some cases put in reverse. God does not want you to learn more about the chemical components of the dirt out of which you were made. He wants to fill you with new wine. There's a whole new realm out there in front of you, more than a concept, the very antithesis of human life. A life that doesn't think like, act like, or react like, or do anything like a human does. And He has come to you on your level to reach down, impart to you from His level, and bring you up to the life source that He lives by. Well, I know that you're probably wondering what my view of education is. But again, I will say that's a human concept. I don't have to have an opinion of a college education. Do I think that you should get a college education? I'm sorry, but I am lukewarm. It's none of your business. I will say that you should not decide if you're going to college. In this society, if you make your decision, you'll almost certainly go. It's the thing that humans do. And the reason you will go is based on reason, logic, and earthly wisdom. But forget college. I'm speaking about anything. We do it by the intricate goings on within our heads, taught to us as far back as the reasonings of Plato and Socrates, or through the didactics of Aristotle. The Christian does not face his decisions from these viewpoints. Divine life is not logical, is not reasonable, does not base its acts on social acceptance or do something because it's the thing to do. You do not go to college. You do not make any decision in your life according to motivations that guarantee you security. That is not the attributes of the higher form of life. He is not motivated by security, nor is he afraid of suffering. Therefore, he does not care to protect himself in the way that the humanity protects itself. Divine life does not move by things such as poverty or riches. Divine life does not see these things as man sees them. The Lord came with total disregard for one, and having lived in the other, showed virtually no interest, either in it as a lifestyle or abandoning it because it was a poor lifestyle. His interests were somewhere else. How then do you live by divine life? The answer is, we need about 30 more meetings just to scratch the surface. That's the answer. One thing for sure, living by divine life is nothing like you imagine. And divine life has a way of being monumentally disinterested in pursuing the ways of fallen human life. Don't get me wrong. A higher life form is not a lazy cop-out. Just a totally different realm of living with a totally different lifestyle. Should you, a Christian, a man with a higher life form in you, decide the directions of your life on the basis that man always has? Or should you make your decisions not in the predictable patterns of human life, but in the deep, intuitive ways of divine life? The only way that you are ever going to find out the real and proper way to face the decisions that you will face upon this planet, and face them through the eyes, no, not through the eyes of God. That would be a standard, but through the very life force of the Lord being lived in you. If you're to do this, then you and I must stop living by human life and begin living by the divine life that is in us. And I'm not saying exactly what you will do then. All I am saying is the way you get there will be totally different. But I'd like to go back to the angels for a moment. Could you interest an angel in calculus? Maybe you could get him down to a Christian musical, get him play a harp there. Maybe you would make his appeal to him, "Oh, angel, use your God-given talents to glorify the Lord." An angel couldn't even compute such language. If you have any idea of what divine life would be like, consider the difference between you and an angel. But even better, consider the Lord Jesus Christ in those 3.5 or 4 years that he lived. So I would ask you to come with me and look through his eyes. You may be amazed. It's wonderful. It's exciting to see someone from another realm invading Earth, coming out of the dimension, seeing the unseen, and also being able to see the seen, coming out of the non-material into the material, coming out of the spiritual into the physical, coming out of the realms of a higher life form to the lower life form. It has never happened before. A life form that had transversed classifications and entered into another life classification. To understand and know its characteristics and its ways and existence. Jesus Christ did that when he became a man. As someone said, it was very much like a man becoming a cockroach. The Lord Jesus must have been fascinated to be introduced to the feelings of logic, or the realms of logic, reason, ambition, the lust of knowledge. I don't mean that he was experiencing that, but to see it and to be able to identify it in those whom he had watched at a little bit more distant vantage point than when he was captured inside a human body. What would it be like if I would have become a puppy? If you would have become a cat? We would begin to get all sorts of senses and feelings that we had never had before. The desire to bark, the desire to rub up against someone's leg and purr. We would begin to understand the instincts of the human, of the dog or of the cat. We would immediately begin to understand why he wags his tail, or why the cat is always chasing the mouse. We would begin to understand at least the instinctiveness of this. Well, God, the highest life form in the universe, transversed his highest state and entered into a third-class state. Why? Because he was compelled by love and because he had a purpose. Look at this life form now in a human body. This invator from outer space. Several things come immediately to our attention. The first thing that hits us is that when divine life takes upon human life and suddenly has the choice of those two lives to live by, he denied his human life and chose to continue living by the life of his Father. He put in second place his human life so that he might live continually, even in human form, by the life he had lived before. That's a very simple observation, but it's very powerful, for it points the Christian to the proper decision for his own life. It is the nature of divine life to live by divine life, even when that life form may be living in the body of another life form. It is the nature of divine life to deny the soul. You may not realize this, but that means he totally denied almost everything that we hold central in human living. Did you ever notice how interested Jesus Christ was in public schools and in technology? Notice how interested he was in getting rich. Notice the big house he lived in. Did you ever watch his view of local taxes? It was classical. And notice just exactly how impressed he was with the Roman Empire and the Roman Emperor. See how much he pressed for education in his own life and those around him. He chose mostly illiterate and ignorant people to be with. But did he not say, "You visited me? You visited one of these in prisons. Shouldn't we go visit the prisoners and the sick?" Well, you've left out one little phrase in that passage. Jesus Christ was interested, terribly interested, in those who had his own life form in them. Like all other life forms in all the universe, he is very interested in his species. We showed virtually no interest at all in the other forms of life, but he spoke often of my brethren, and he was referring to those who would have the life of God in them. He was not a social reformer trying to right the wrongs of the destitute. He was interested in my brethren. God did not come to earth to get all wrapped up in the activities of war life form. He lived according to the disposition of his own life. And God in Christ turned out not to be all that interested in science, becoming famous, acquiring creature comforts, or amassing wealth. Living by his life as he did, he lived by the life of the Father. And he showed and reflected the interest and the disinterest of his Father. Look at him. Life form number 3 is so logical, so complex. Life form number 1 came along. So simple. Overwhelmingly uncomplicated. He spoke in simple words about simple things, in simple ways, living a simple life. And he was mostly responded to by the simple. When mental men came to Jesus with complex questions and flawless logic, he stunned them with his childlike answers, destroyed their pretentious reasoning. He was the essence of simplicity in thought, way, outlook, desire, and living. He was another kind of life, and a higher one. And yet a life, though it was higher, was not given to complexity. Who would have ever guessed that a higher life form would be not more complex, but simpler than man? You're in reverse when you're complex. That's the fallenness of your life showing. A simple life is more advanced than a complex life. You need only look at the Lord than that to see that. The divine life was more simple than the human life he came to save. He came here to introduce on this earth a new species. That's why he came. Not a new race, but a new species, one that had never existed on this planet before. A visible creature it would be, not like angels who are invisible, but a visible species that lived by divine life, God's life. Not until that time had God's life ever been visible. Previously, it had only been invisible. Now he wished for a living creature who could be seen to live by his life. That new species had its beginning in the heavenly places, but came to earth, and that is still true today. The life that is in you came from outer space. It came from beyond space. It came from spiritual realms where there is no space. When he looked at Nicodemus and said, "You must be born again," he didn't say you must be born again. He looked and pointed to other realms, and his exact words are this: you must be born from out there, from above. And you belong to that race that has its origins out there.
There is a species, plant, species,
Fish, species, angels. But God wants another species, his own, living here on this planet, the sons of God. And that's why Christ came and saved us. We've been rejoicing in that salvation. Good. But we have also been starting organizations for the preservation of clay pots, broken wine goblets, ever since our salvation. We forgot our goal is the stars. The age that you and I live in does not know that this new species, has divine life in us. It has never occurred to us that we can live by the same life Jesus Christ got up in the morning and lived by. It's high time that you, like the early believers, started relearning how to live by a life, not your own. It's time the divine race started living by divine life. It's time that the words, the chosen of God, and the joint heirs of God, and the brethren of Christ, the sons of God, take on its true meaning, that we have that divine portion in us, and to become practiced in finding that life embedded somewhere within us, and begin making contact with that life, and begin the rudimentary experience of living by life, not our own. I must say to you that to introduce a new species to this earth was not all that your Lord came for. He also came here on this earth to set up a nation. I gave an illustration of what would happen if a new species came to this earth. It would find a logic or reasonable habitat, and there it would begin to live, pretty well ignoring what was going on in the ocean. Well, Jesus Christ came to set up a nation where his new species could live together. Birds live in flocks, sheep live in folds, fish live in schools, ants live in anthills, man lives in a colossal mess called nation, interlocked together called civilization. God's new species would also have its flock, its herd, its hill, its nation, its civilization, but not really, because it would be a different species with something different. It would be, he called it, a kingdom. I am tempted to say he came to bring a higher civilization. No. Like Martians coming invading from outer space. I would say this, but his life form did not come for civilization. That's the lower life ideal. He came. When he came to Israel. He spoke of a kingdom. Some thought he would set up a kingdom, a human, a lower life form kingdom there that would be like and supplant the kingdoms of the pagan nations. Maybe take over Rome. Some thought this is what he would do. Maybe they thought he would go to Switzerland and start a little group hidden away in the Alps and do guerrilla warfare. He didn't do that. Where did he plan to locate his flock, his school of fish, his foe, his nation, his anthill? That's a very interesting question. Would he put it on this earth, build a wall around it with streets like other men? No, again, that was a human thought, a lower life form thought. No, he would not, as an invader from other realms, bring forth something that was patterned after something on this earth. No, as the being one who had come in, an invader from other realms, he would introduce something upon this earth that was patterned after other realms. It would look like something. It would be like something in another realm. It would not have any similarity whatsoever to any nation, flock, anthill, foe, school, gang, nation of any other life form upon this earth. That there would be a place, a habitat, where his new species could live together in one place and more or less ignore the fish and the cattle and the angels. To have this nation would take a very special place, a very special piece of ground, and it would need a capital city. No, not at all. That's little life form stuff. That's what number 3 does. He would have his new species and a new kingdom he would have on this earth. But it did not have to be located in any one place. His kingdom could locate anywhere. His race could spread across the nations, beyond the earth, beyond any specific place on the earth. It would not need any kind of citizenship that overlapped with the other nation. It was a nation without boundary, just as the kingdom in heavenly realms and that other sphere also is without boundaries. It could be anywhere it pleased to be. That would be their habitat. For that is their way. This was the Lord's plan. And furthermore, he has an even greater plan for this nation of his. He plans for this new species to not only live on this earth as a nation, but to conquer the whole world and annex the whole planet and bring it into heavenly realms. He came here for the purpose of conquest. He came here to join the heavenly kingdom with the earthly realm and make them one. And therefore he would then become king not over 2 realms, but one. He plans to be king and Lord of earth, just as he is already king and Lord of heavenly places. Do not doubt his subversive intentions. He is a revolutionary. No, he is the revolutionary. He was in the first century, he is now, and he will be until the day he conquers. He has a revolutionary plan that far exceeds anything ever fashioned by men or angels. He introduced his nation, his flock, his habitat upon this earth, where his species would gather together and live by his life. A new species was called by a name. That name is the new man. Not the old man patched up, but literally a new creation introduced in about the year 33 or 34 AD to this earth. And he set up a nation. And you know what he did? He made himself head of that nation.
This is the most glorious nation on earth, for Jesus Christ is the king of that citizenry. The citizens of that country are all a new species that just is less than 2,000 years old. And where they live, they come together to live by divine life. They have a way of living unknown to ants, unknown to bees, unlike anything the salmon know, anything the beavers or even old third-class men can ever comprehend. I tell you, the place where they gather in the way that they live, as they live by divine life together, is glorious. I've been there. For this civilization, this habitat, this glorious and unique place is a place where Jesus Christ dwells. Where is it located? How can you become a citizen of it? How can you migrate or immigrate there? What is it? You became a citizen of that nation by birth on the very day that divine life was born in you. It is a nation located somewhere on this earth, irrespective of what other forms of life or any rules of any other forms of life. It doesn't go into the water to build like the beaver. It doesn't go into the islands to live like the seagulls. It does not model itself after any pattern of any other lower life form on this earth. It doesn't copy them. It doesn't interfere with them. It doesn't pay any attention what the other life forms are doing in their habitat. It's not interested in what the bee or the seagull or even fallen man is doing. It is a species apart, and it is living for that species. Unlike third-class man, the species does not set up patterns, nor boundaries, nor philosophies, nor political ways, no organizational structure. For sure it does not do that. It does not engage in the way the bees and ants and men do it. It is not patterned after any other form of life in this universe. But I will tell you one thing it does do. It kidnaps. Every once in a while it goes out and kidnaps a lower life form that had been chosen before the foundation of the ages to receive a higher form of life. It kidnaps them and brings them to their proper habitat where the divine race dwells together, living by a life not human, but living by the life of God. Kidnapping is called by a process known as the new birth. What is this mission like? It spreads all over the earth. It's very difficult sometimes to even find. But they meet, and when they meet, they talk, they share, they rejoice. And most of all, they follow their king together. If you're one of this new species, you really ought to give up your third-rate ways with its religions, its ways, its habitats, and everything that it has, and come over to your own life form, and come to the nation of which you are a citizen by birth. You really, really look funny running around out there with little life forms, like a dog trying to be a chicken, or an eagle trying to be a fish. Come up to the glory of your own nation. Return to your own people, and take hold of the life that is in you, and live by a higher life. And you know the name of this glorious nation. You know its name, the name of this kingdom. It's called the Ecclesia. It's the church. And no other life form in the universe has anything like it. Hallelujah. And if you're a new Christian, you've now learned how to do things the wrong way. Like the ugly duckling, you only need to figure out that you're a swan and not a duck. And stop trying to imitate those ducks and find that swan life in you and live by that life and run around with swans. Let the ducks take care of their own problems and let them have their own ambitions to achieve. You go with the ways of the swan. You have two things to do. One is to learn to live by the life of God, then live by that life together with those who have the same life. Or to put it another way, learn to live by Christ and live out that life of His in the church. Pack your bag. Join the rest of your species in the land of
avec l'océan.
Click here to watch another spiritually rich message from Gene Edwards and continue your journey into the depths of Christ.